Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Guillermo Ruiz.
Hello everyone. Before introducing my guest today, I have some good news. As you might know, I just recently graduated from the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, and I am about to start my practice. I will be offering free 15-minute consultations to see if you want to work with me. Stay tuned for the big announcement. My guest today is Kendall Kendrick. She is a motivational speaker and nutrition therapy practitioner who specializes in the ancestral connection through stress management, nutrition, lifestyle, mindfulness, and empowerment. She is also the co-founder of Evolved Recovery, a holistic approach to society. In the show, we talk about addiction, struggles within the paleo framework, and her new book, Born Primal, Conversations with the Ancestral Health Community. Kendall has also offered a free book to one of my listeners. So if you want to be entered into the raffle, please follow me on my Instagram account, 3030strong. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, I'm here with Kendall Kendrick. We have so many friends in common in this movement. We just connected when we met at AHS. She's such an amazing person. I've been following her for a couple of years, and now we're friends. So how cool is that? Yeah. So Kendall, how are you doing?
Well, I'm living life. I think that's my new normal sentence.
Yeah,
so
just writing
I have
books.
a really full life. Yeah, writing books. I have 4 daughters. So it's, yeah. I don't know. I never have like a really good answer to that. I'm good. We'll just leave it at that. I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah, because, you've had a pretty crazy year.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But when we met at AHS, you're just smiles and hugs and so much like positive energy. And we're just talking about like the people that we know and we are mutual friends with, and it's just a big family.
Oh, it really truly is. I think that one thing that I've been able to rely on, especially the last kind of 5 years of going to conferences and being part of the ancestral health paleo family, is like relying on those friendships. In fact, I always come back from conferences so oxytocin like depleted and I'm generally like, my family is just like, can you go somewhere else for a while to get over that before you come home, because I'm so depressed from leaving all those impactful, powerful friendships. My very best friends in the world are in that community, and none of them live near me, So, I mean, a lot of my friends are out west, and here I am in North Carolina around no one. And I've always struggled with that feeling of not fitting in for a good part of my life. Some things happened when I was young, and my life kind of altered for, ever. And I've always struggled with making friends, even though I'm incredibly extroverted, as I'm sure you can tell, and everybody would say that about me. But, my self-esteem hasn't always been high, and felt comfortable and feeling liked. And I feel like that's what this community of ours, like you said, all of our mutual friends, I just feel like they're my family. They're my best friends, even if I see them once or twice a year. So when I do see them, I just take it all in. I take a whole year's worth back home with me, and I'm usually like cry for 2 days because I love the tribe. I love the tribe feeling, and it's so hard in a daily life to have it.
So, because I do want to talk about extroversion, introversion, and recharging, totally, but before we start, for my listeners who are more in the naturopathic community that might not be completely aware, because you have been missing in action for the past couple of years, what's your hero story? How did you come into this movement?
Wow. So I love that you mentioned the naturopathic community, because honestly, that's a big part of it for me. Well, essentially, I grew up a really, really sick kid. I had my first allergy testing done when I was about 6 or 7, and I just remember it being an entire paper full of allergies. So I had this really weird connection with food from a very young age, and it was the 80s. So nobody knew how to deal with that stuff. I can remember my dad going to like some random person's house to pick up supposedly some dairy-free milk. And I can almost guarantee you that it probably had, corn syrup or something in it. And I was also allergic to corn. So I was allergic to cheese and milk and corn and just everything, all this stuff that kind of now, when you look at it, fits into this kind of paleo model. And I guess that's why I connected to it when I finally found it about 6.5 years ago. But yeah, so I was this really sick kid. I've probably been on 30 rounds of antibiotics in my life. So you could just imagine the kind of gut destruction that I've been faced with forever. And I lived a very crazy young life. I became a radio DJ at 17, was a local celebrity by 19. I chain smoked, ate fast food all day. I was really, really skinny. I could never put weight on. So that gave me this idea that it didn't matter what I ate. I could just eat whatever I wanted and do whatever I wanted, and it wasn't going to matter. But again, I was always sick. I had a sinus infection like every single month. It would affect my career, being a radio DJ, being a voice actor, which I still am today. I'm not on the radio anymore, but I still do voiceover. And so at some point, I had to start kind of coming to terms that at 20, it was one thing to be sick all the time, but did I want to be sick forever? And something happened that forced me to face that. It was that I got pregnant when I was 23 with my oldest daughter, who's 16 now. So you can go ahead and just do the math and find out how old I am. I'm 40. Fine, I'm 40. Proud of it. I'm rocking my gray and I love it. So I knew that there was this other connection for me with ancestral life. Wasn't anything that anybody ever told me about. I still to this day don't even know like where it came from. But when I was 5 years old, I grew up in Florida and in Central Florida in a farming community. And
Where
then
in Florida?
Plant City and Lakeland.
No way.
Yes.
So
have you heard of those? Because no one's ever heard of them.
So I went to high school in Belle Glade, Florida, which is in the muck. Okay, and then I'm a UCF Knight.
Wow. There you go. See, one more thing.
Yeah.
So you know the area well.
Totally.
You understand that.
Plant City strawberries.
Right. So I grew up in Lakeland. I was born there, which is less rural. But my grandparents, so I'm a 7th generation Floridian farmer, which, means we're Europeans who came over and colonized and, did terrible things and took over that land in Florida and farmed all these years. And my grandparents had the farm in Plant City. And, they were incredibly poor. I mean, my dad, his siblings, they all literally grew up in the 1950s and 60s living off the land. So that I'm not very far removed from that. I watched my grandparents continue to do that, until they both died in the 2000s. My grandfather just died a few years ago and my grandmother died about 12 years ago. And so I had this deep connection to the land in that way. And then what I also had is I would go to Miami to see my mother's mother, and she always had these stacks of National Geographic magazines. And I, was this like 5-year-old little girl, this totally European, Irish, Scotch, British, absolutely almost 100% European. And I couldn't wait to get into those magazines and look for the, tribes of the Amazon and of Africa. It would excite me. It would fulfill me to just see those pictures of these women that were naked with babies on them and adorned in these tribal dressings. Had a deep connection from the very beginning with that. Never understood it until kind of recently, And so when I got pregnant with my oldest daughter, I had watched some shows on what was called the Learning Channel, TLC, and they used to show these birth shows every day. And so when I was on the radio, I used to do a morning show and I'd always nap in the afternoon. And so that was my ritual. I would go home, I would turn on the TLC, I would watch the birth stories. This is long before I ever got pregnant. I always had a fascination with babies, knew I would become a mother. And I would watch those episodes. And what always drew me in was the quiet water births that were beautiful, the way the babies would come into the world. And then the ones that I didn't really like were these really high intervention births in the hospitals. It just didn't sit well with me. It was I don't think that's what I want. But again, remember, I'm not like crunchy at that point. Again, I'm like chain smoking, Virginia Slims every day, and I'm totally unhealthy, and I party with rock stars every night. I mean, none of it really made sense to me until I got pregnant, and then it was like, okay, home birth was not a big thing. This is like 2001. So now it's a pretty common thing. Somebody says, yeah, I'm having a home birth. Most people don't really freak out about it. But I can tell you that back then, I was up against many obstacles to be able to have my baby at home. So I've always been a bit of a rebel, and not really cared what people with authority said to me, and told me what to do. And thank goodness for that, because it's what drove me to think outside of the box and to find these connections in life that I wanted to have. And so I did. I had my first daughter at home. Subsequently had my twins at home, which people think is really nutty. I carried them to 39 weeks. They were 6.5 pounds and 7/10, so full-size healthy babies. And then I had my fourth daughter at home as well. So I had all my children at home, and
all girls.
All girls, yeah, all girls. It's not now, yeah. Let me tell you what having 3 teenagers and a 9-year-old is like. That's why maybe I'm gray. I don't know, but they're amazing, and they're definitely the light of my life. So when I found that new awareness of health when I was pregnant with my oldest, because I had a midwife, and she was like, "Yeah, you're not going to home birth if you keep eating the way that you're eating." Like, obviously, I'd quit smoking and I'd quit caffeine, but I was still eating a lot of fast food and just didn't even understand. So my entrance into wanting to understand a more natural lifestyle that made more sense to this ancestral piece did begin 17 years ago with that pregnancy. But I went down some roads that weren't so great, like vegetarianism and veganism, that definitely did not work for me. They made me really sick.
Well, the information was out there.
Right. And that I was hanging with these, super granola crunchy moms. And, we were like all breastfeeding each other's babies. Like we were doing, this kind of tribe thing going on. But that's what they were all doing to eat like that. And so I thought, I clearly, like, they know more than I do. Let me just do whatever they're doing. So it didn't work for me. But then some really rough stuff happened in my life when I was 29. And my twins were only 2, and my oldest was about 4 or 5. Their father and I divorced. So I was basically a 30-year-old with 3 toddlers as a single mom, and didn't have a full-time job, was trying to get my voiceover career off the ground. And it was a very, very stressful time. And my children got really sick with the flu one year during all of that. And my youngest twin developed, croup, pneumonia. And she began coughing, and then she just never quit coughing. Like, it ended up turning into what we call coughing asthma. So not the kind of asthma where you're running and
atypical asthma.
It's not. But and I also ended up developing the exact same asthma as her when I got remarried and became pregnant with their little sister. We lived in a house. What exasperated all of that, we moved into this 100-year-old, really beautiful house, but it had a serious dust issue with the HVAC system. So we all ended up really sick and not understanding. We're doing all this mold testing. We don't know what's wrong with us. So anyway, finally 4 years of coughing, her turning blue. I'm going down the medical road. I'm doing everything I know to do, and it's not working. So I sought out a naturopathic doctor locally.
Cool.
We went in, we did some food sensitivity testing, and essentially what showed up with that was this way of eating that completely matches the paleo diet. She had to go off of, and nobody used that word then, we weren't talking about any of that, but it was her sensitivities were like grains and dairy and gluten and all these things. So we saw that work so beautifully. Her asthma went away a week later after those eliminations, and it never returned. To this day, it's never come back. She doesn't even eat that way anymore, but it healed her gut. It healed her body. We did the probiotics. We did all of these healing protocols, and it worked. And so at that point, I was like, well, her sister has, Asperger's. I've heard this thing about this gluten-free, casein-free diet. Let's see how that works. So that was the next step. And then I started seeing changes in her twin with, her autism symptoms were getting better. And not that she won't always have those symptoms. She was born with that, and it runs in the family. But if her life can be a little more functional and feel a little bit better. She was in physical pain from eating gluten, like very, very sick. And So I just started seeing all these healing things happen. And the next step was when I found out about the paleo diet, which was in that same year. We were already all gluten free, but I wasn't having the same healing reaction just from being gluten free and dairy free. I had actually had a near death experience that year. I was pregnant with my last baby, and I lost it at the end of my first trimester. And when I lost the baby, I almost bled to death. So unfortunately, the one time in a pregnancy situation I needed the hospital to be there, they actually neglected me for 3 hours in the emergency room and let me bleed out. And it's still a little bit hard for me to think about that situation because I was laying there dying on a hospital bed and nobody was coming to my aid. But then the right person did come to my aid and I survived, and it changed my life forever. So it was also during that year that I was so anemic. I mean, I always try to tell people, when you need a blood transfusion, they only give you enough to keep you alive. There really is a blood shortage, and it really is important that we go give blood.
And it's so funny because, yeah, we look at the levels of hematocrit, and depending on where you are, there's like an on-off, like, for example, if you get to a certain level and below, you're anemic, and then at the level above, you're not. So that it makes sense in when you have like shortages. What is the minimum thing that you can do in order to maintain this person alive and then fix things on the back end? But we do that with everything. For example, with hypothyroidism, the range is, first of all, so big, 0.45 to 4.5 for your TSH. And it's like, if you're 0.44, you are hyperthyroidic. But if you're 0.45, you're okay. Like, it makes no sense. It's same thing with hypothyroidism. If you're at 4.6, you're hypothyroid. If you're at 4.5, you are fine. Like, it's an on switch. We don't see this as a range. We see it as a 1 point difference is the difference between health and being unhealthy. And that's why you need to search, and you got to be like your own advocate for your health, because there is a specific functional range where you're going to be maximally and optimally healthy. And having this like on off, that's not how physiology works.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Yeah, I mean, I remember being in the ER when I was still sort of conscious, and they kept coming in. I mean, my numbers are just dropping every hour, right? They're running all this blood work, and I'm like, I'm telling them now I've doulaed other friends' births. Like I'm pretty much a pro at that point about birthing and what you need. And I'd hemorrhaged before at home and been able to deal with it with Pitocin and Methergen. So I'm literally saying I knew, I mean, I feel like if we have a community of doctors listening, I can be a little bit graphic and just say that, like, I knew I had not delivered the entire placenta. And so I knew what the problem was. I knew that I needed a D&E. I knew that I needed Methergen. I knew they needed to get an ultrasound and just check and see that placenta was stuck, And so, I'm saying all these things. And I remember one of the PAs in the ER came to me and just said, yeah, you're going to bleed for a few days. And I'm just like, I'm dying. I'm literally, my husband is there holding my 2-year-old daughter, and he's fighting for me to stay alive, and I'm dying. And I'm like, how is this incompetence even possible? I could not believe in a first world country, I'm laying in an ER with good insurance, and they're going to let me die. It was shock, even though, and the whole thing is I should have been taken to maternity in the first place. It was just an absolute lapse in everything. So what I realized a year later after that, when I'm still completely anemic, I cannot recover. When I found the paleo diet, this was the most intense thing. When I found it, I was just trying to lose like baby weight, which is stuff that I have a lot of issues with now. So that's a whole nother story. And I'm actually about to post an article about all of that. But the beautiful thing was the healing is that what I realized for me is that the grain consumption and eating all the things that had just been personally inflammatory to my system, I have severe insulin resistance, a family of diabetes. And what I found is when I cut all that stuff out, all of a sudden my body could absorb the nutrients and the iron from the meat that I was eating. That was what changed. So overnight, I wasn't anemic anymore. Like it blew my mind. I'd been anemic my entire life.
It's the good old Rob Wolf approach. Used car salesman. You come in for the abs. You stay for the sustainability, for the longevity, for the community. It's like we're just trying to convince people with the most flashiest thing we can do, which is let's get you ready for swimsuit season, and then you come in, and then we take off the veil, and you can see all the benefits that whatever you want to call it, paleo primal, ancestral, whatever that this community has to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So that was it. That's my hero moment. It was all of those things. I did it for my children first, but then when I saw, my life altered, that's when I knew that this had to become my calling. And I went in and I, became a nutritional therapy practitioner, and kind of the end of the story there.
Okay, guys. So this is it. This is our show.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Kendall. What are your handles? No, and I just want to, because holy shit, there's so much to talk about. For example, on my blog right now, I have a iron post, and it's around 6,000 words.
Whoa.
Yeah, talking about why iron is so important, and it goes through, like you said, healing your gut so you can actually absorb it. Or what about people that say, oh, just eat leafy greens? Well, that's a form of iron that needs an extra step for absorption. And when you eat animal products, that iron goes directly into your system. It doesn't need that extra step. So the more messed up your gut is, the more processing that iron needs. So then you don't have that iron available. And then what is iron useful for? Well, just everything. For example,
just keeping you alive.
First and foremost, to deliver oxygen to your cells, but also to convert your thyroid hormones, to help you with your adrenal health, for your immune system. It helps you destroy pathogens. It's like so important. And in order to have a good understanding of all the things that iron, or like to test for iron, we're as practitioners, we're not even doing it right. So my friend Billy Mitchell and me went crazy on this subject, and now I have 6,000 words on this subject. And if you have been told in the past that you're anemic, or you have excess iron, hemochromatosis, it's so important to control those levels. But we have so many topics because, like, for example, let's talk a little bit about extroversion and introversion. I just had Triple Peak Paleo, Ellen Jaworski, on my show.
She's amazing. I got to hang out with her over dinner at AHS, and I love her so much. That was our first time meeting.
So she's out there killing it with her Instagram lives and, just like documenting her life. And then at one point she says, "Oh, I'm an introvert." And I'm like, what? So as recovering extroverts that we are, after each one of these conferences, I get home and I'm spent, because you have to be on and you're like doing Facebook Lives and talking to people and introducing yourself and taking selfies. How do you recharge? What's your process like? Because this takes a lot of energy, and you don't have to be an AHS presenter to experience this. It could be, going to school and giving a big presentation, or asking for a promotion, or all these stressful things that we encounter on a day-to-day life. How do you go back to your normal life and then establish a baseline again?
I think it's funny because you mentioned her with the introversion and being out there on social media, and that's definitely what I've watched over the years, is that this online community, the social media, most of the people who are the most out there on there are actually introverts. And I'm not like that on there. Like I'm not a person who I spend a lot of my time on social media. It's how I connect and, hang out with my friends and put things out there. But I hate, I'll be honest with you. I hate doing video work. Like doing these Facebook lives and the Instagram lives and the stories, it makes me miserable. I am terrible at this stuff because I've spent 23 years now behind a microphone. So that's home for me. Like right now, I'm just sitting in my voiceover studio that I come in here. I'm the voice of the New York Times, the 1-800 number. I'm the voice of many, many 1-800 numbers. There's a good chance you have called and like cursed me out when you call the 1-800 number. You're just like, operator, please, right? So that's like what I do for the most part. I record, I voice over corporate videos, and you know, you've probably heard me on a radio station in between songs somewhere in some city. Who knows? But that's home for me. That's what I do. So being on video is still really super awkward for me. And I'm a speaker, you know, I speak in front of audiences. I'm really comfortable on stage, but I don't want to see me. I don't want to know what I look like doing that, you know? And so that idea of like recording a video of myself, it's not comfortable at all, but I can work a room like it's nobody's business. So I almost wonder, like, maybe for the people who are dealing with more introversion, like they get to express that part of themselves, but feel comfortable not having to actually physically be in other people's energy spaces. And for me, I am fed by being in other people's energy
100%.
spaces.
I'm the same way.
Right. So I remember, you know, my first couple of conferences with some of my early buddies in ancestral health, and being at AHS and PFX, and then realizing I'd be sitting at a dinner and it'd be me and like 4 introverts. And I suddenly realized like I became the token extrovert for everybody because they could just kind of hide behind me, and I'm out there. You know, I'm a big personality. I always have been, you know, thanks radio, but it was really funny for me to kind of realize all of a sudden that I was the extrovert of the crowd. But it does wear you out. And I do think that, well, I mean, like, so one part that we haven't actually talked about, I know we talked about talking about it, is that I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. And so there's a big part of my life where when I was drinking, or very, very long ago when I was using, I was very young when that was going on. But it was very easy to be under the influence and be super, super extroverted. So what I found in recovery and in sobriety is that I'm not quite as extroverted as I always thought I was. I now actually need a lot more alone time to recharge. And so, yeah, it's probably why I took a little break from going to conferences. Like, I just had a lot going on and needed to sort of reel it in a little bit. And so now I guess I'm a little bit more of what we call an ambivert, right? Like, I was like, what does that mean? But like extroverted and introverted extrovert or something to that, you know, nature. So I'm out there and I'm on and I'm loving every second of it. But like you said, when you come home, woo, it's a challenge for me, you know. And again, like, I have 4 children that I care for every hour of the day. So when I come home, there's no downtime. And I'm not making videos on social media. I'm driving people to school, to gymnastics. I'm making meals. I'm dealing with some pretty intense busyness in my life. And working to not be a busy addict and not be a stress addict. So I'm also working to like balance all of that. So yeah, I don't know. I go and, like I said, I fill up and I come home pretty depressed for a few days and I recover, but I just go right back to life. There's 4 or 5, well, you know, 5 people, including my husband, that depend on me. So that's my time.
It's almost like you can't take a day off.
What does that mean? Day off?
Oh,
Huh? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Like, it gets to the point that vacations become a chore.
Yeah, I mean, a vacation alone with like my husband to a tropical island, that's like amazing. I don't think we've done that in 4 years. The last couple of times we've done that, I was actually working and co-leading, you know, retreats in Jamaica. So while it was fun, it was still work. Yeah, our vacations now just kind of look like a beach trip every summer with our children, and it's not a vacation. It's just cooking food and cleaning up after people in a different location.
Yeah, you know, and that's what people, you know, like Ellen tells me that she has to like escape and she goes and has lunch by herself. Me, on the other hand, I get anxious if I have lunch by myself. Like, I'm always looking for someone to have lunch with me, which is completely different. And it's so interesting because, you know, we're trying to do the best for the community, trying to put out information, and sometimes it only comes from one side of the room, you know, like the loudmouths like you and me.
Exactly.
but but
Exactly.
but seriously, for anyone listening, if you feel like you're an introvert and you don't want to put yourself out there, there's so many ways that you can influence this community and the world. Don't let this stop you. Figure out a way. Maybe you want to coach, health coach one on one. Maybe you want to write a blog. Don't let anything stop you if you have this feeling of saving this society.
Oh, absolutely. And I like I said, I think some of the most powerful players in this community are highly introverted. And maybe you wouldn't even guess, but I know for a fact so many of them are. And when you're not maybe right there at conferences or having dinner with these folks or getting to know them like in person in that way, you're going to make some assumptions about who they might be because how you see them put themselves out online. But then you see that in person and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, they're introverted too. And, there's always ways to find relatable pieces of anybody to yourself.
Totally. And just like you were saying that, your daughters, is this your twin daughters, the one with the croup and the one that had some Asperger symptoms?
Yeah, that's my twins. Yeah, they're both actually on the spectrum.
And it's like the same, like disease manifests in different ways, and it might be the same mechanism, but you might manifest it maybe as croup, maybe as this cough asthma, or you might manifest it as being on the spectrum, and it's the same thing. You might see just like the social media persona, but you don't know how that person is in a one-to-one conversation.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that like raising four daughters, so two are extroverted and two are introverted. And so, but even, one of the one of the extroverts is very shy. So I get to just watch these little women and wow, there's such an amazing like lab experiment for me to see all these different things. And like, even so with the twins, the one twin who was sick first when she was young, she has ADD. She's highly extroverted. She's like literally my twin. She is me as a kid. That was me, ADD, extroverted, all of that. She is me. We don't know a stranger. My oldest daughter, 16, I tell her all the time, do you know what I was doing at your age? Like she collects animals. She has rats and snakes. She's in early college. She's 16. She's a junior in high school, but she's a freshman in college. She is going in to get a science degree. She has plants all over her room, and she spends Friday nights in her room nerding out. And I spent my Friday nights at like 14, doing things. We're just going to say that. I'm just doing things, right? Not at home, breaking curfew, lying, doing whatever I wanted to do. So, I have that. And then I have the twin sister who has Asperger's and is very introverted. And then my 9-year-old is this full-time gymnast. She's a competitive gymnast. She homeschools to do gymnastics. She's literally in the gym every day. And she has she's very extroverted. She's this, crazy, awesome redhead. And she just has this drive to go do what she loves. And I'm like, where did that come from? I don't know who gave you that, but awesome. So I do. I live with all of these different people, and they have each of their own beautiful gifts. And so that has taught me how to see that in everybody else I come across.
It sometimes is difficult because, like, for example, going to a conference with my friends, like with Tiffany and Billy, and I'm always like, okay, we got to do the VIP dinner. We got to go make our, show our faces at the posters, and then make sure you talk to this person, because it's going to help our careers, or we're going to have more impact. And I can see Tiffany's face just getting like more nervous and nervous and nervous. And like, because I don't know what it feels like to be an introvert. How did you
Right.
manage? How do you switch hats when you have 4 personalities in your very close environment?
Well, I think just figuring out what each person, I am like I said, I'm ADD, so I am a super great multitasker, even though that's not like a helpful thing in our society. I don't totally like, I don't agree that that's a good thing. I'm a big believer in mindfulness and doing one thing at a time, but it's because I've had to teach myself that. But then the other, like, kind of the positive of that is that I can manage all four of these girls and their personalities, and they have incredibly different needs. And we have a lot of life stress. We've had a lot of really hardships happen in their lives and our lives together as a family, and we've faced some very, very dark places altogether. We're still facing some, and we just support each other and we try to meet each other's needs. And I mean, I think that's all you can ask for in life, is just to be open-minded. I've had to just learn how to be a better person because of them. I was an incredibly selfish person. I did whatever I wanted to do, being this, kind of crazy ADD extroverted person who wanted to live this big life. And I've had to let a lot of that go and know that, not that their lives are any more important than mine. I'm a big believer in self-care for moms. I've been to the bottom of that and know that's not a good place to go when you give everything to your children and keep nothing for yourself. You got to, as my best buddy, Sarah Fragoso, always says, put your mask on first in the airplane, right? I finally figured that out. But yeah, just meeting their needs. And I hope that I do that outside of my family too. I hope that I give that to people in life, because that's really who I want to be.
And exactly that, how to self-care. We want to be selfless, but sometimes if you recharge a little bit, you're going to provide so much better care than if you didn't.
Absolutely.
So you're actually hurting the tribe if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I've gone through that a little bit lately. I've slipped with my boundaries setting with my children and their needs. And one in particular has had a very, very difficult year. And, kind of out of my fear, I started just completely letting go of the boundaries and not taking care of myself and giving everything I had to just her. And it really backfired in a terrible way. And so I've had to learn how to get that self-care in no matter what, to make sure I'm just taking super good care of myself. And then also just, for any parent out there, boundaries are your best friend. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Like, you can love your children. You can be their friends. When people say I'm not my child's friend, I'm their parent, it makes me feel really gross. Like, it kind of makes me angry, because you can actually be your child's friend and you can still set boundaries with them. I mean, you should be setting boundaries with your own friends in your life, right? But you can love them, but you can have boundaries. Like, you're not going to let somebody just use and abuse you, hopefully. You'll do the same thing in relationships. You'll set those boundaries.
So, as an extrovert, and I really have a really addictive personality. I don't know if you can relate to that.
No, I don't know what
Not
you're
at all.
talking about.
And like, for example, I love the feeling of coffee and, like the caffeine, and I love my alkaloids. And I just have this more is more persona, and do you think there's like some association with this type of ADD-ish kind of mentality, out, trying to conquer the world in addiction?
Oh, I absolutely do. I see it kind of all the time now, being in addiction, working in addiction recovery. I see it a lot. But I also, it's interesting because again, going back to all these personalities, I see a lot of people who are in recovery who are like, yeah, I'm very introverted. I drank alone. I used alone. And I didn't feel like I fit in this world. So, I think, like, my dad is 30 years sober, and he wouldn't mind me breaking his anonymity with that. And I know for him, that's part of what his drinking was about, was being very introverted, not feeling like he fit in this world, that there wasn't like a place for him, right? So mine was I never even really liked to drink when I was very young and using. I mean, I wanted to be up. I was into club drugs. I was in the club every night. It's like I said, I was on rock star buses, like snorting cocaine. That was all I ever wanted, was to just feel different than I felt and feel up. So I'm not sure, I don't think everybody with ADD or maybe some addiction stuff or whatever, that's necessarily what it is for them. That's what it was for me. Partly I had trauma as a child. And so I learned at a really young age, when my addiction began, which I was actually 10 years old, that I needed to escape and not feel what I was feeling. So for me, that did come out in this extroverted kind of ADD way of never being able to do one thing at a time, always looking for the high, the caffeine. Like I said, even when I was 21 and I was sober, I was still, chain smoking, because that's certainly a stimulant, nicotine is. And then I was drinking coffee and sodas all day, like on the radio. We just, we just indulged, right? And then again, like I'd be out at a bar with a band and working or whatever, and everybody would be drinking around me or, doing drugs, whatever. And because I was sober, I wasn't doing that, but I would drink extra caffeine so I could feel. And then what I would also do is I would get into their vibe. Like it was almost like I don't even know what the word is right now. I'm having a hard time finding it, but just feeling their buzz, just that energy, so I could feel it because I couldn't actually drink or do drugs. So yeah, it's been a lot of work. I mean, really what that comes down to, I think, is just sort of that serotonin and dopamine stuff. And that's what we talk about in, I have an addiction recovery-based company, which is actually what I presented a poster on at AHS this year in Seattle, is we call it Evolved Recovery, and it's a holistic guide to living sober. It works with any conjunction of recovery. We don't promote or put down any way that anybody chooses to recover. So whether that's the 12 steps or it's anything else, using religion or not using anything, whatever it is, our program is just an add-on to whatever you choose to do. And it's just about, nutrition and lifestyle. And ultimately, it's learning about how to stop self-medicating and how to stop trading addictions. And we talk a lot about the science of it, that we've sort of coined this term, and I'm sure that we're not researchers and we're not scientists. So other researchers and scientists are probably like, why is she saying that? But we kind of call it dopamine resistance because we like to compare it to insulin resistance, And so an addict will just go for the dopamine hit every time, just over and over and over again. Give me more, give me more, give me more, right? And that's what we find in addiction recovery when we start talking about trading addictions. So a lot of people, especially in this natural holistic world, like to kind of rail on Alcoholics Anonymous or any other 12-step programs because, there's this idea you go in and there's coffee and there's, cookies or cakes or whatever. And it's even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it actually kind of talks about using chocolate to help with those early cravings and stuff. And that book was written, back in the 40s, I believe, 30s or 40s. And so people can really tend to judge that. And as a person who's been through that myself, twice now, actually, I've gotten sober and gone into recovery twice. I had a pretty long relapse when I was younger. I stayed sober for a while, and then I started drinking again, thinking that was going to be okay for me because it wasn't the drugs. And while I didn't hit much of a bottom with that, I knew that I was self-medicating with wine. I knew that I was going through really painful, tumultuous stuff in my life. With my children and other people involved in their lives. And I was just kind of numbing out with the wine. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to feel my feelings. I want to learn to live life, whether that hurts or it feels good. And so what we see in addiction recovery is sometimes people do replace with the sugar and the food or the whatever, whatever it may be. And while we're all human and we're all going to do that to a degree, it's just helpful if we can start to become aware of why we're seeking that dopamine hit. And to just give one example of something that we talk about often, one of the biggest problems that my business partner, Susan McCauley, who's also a nutritionist with Evolved Recovery, the biggest issues we see is the trading the marathon addiction. So you get sober, you get off heroin or whatever, and then you become a marathon runner. So you're literally running marathons every weekend. And it becomes an issue because, again, it's just an escape. It's just a way to get a high. It's a way to get that dopamine surge. And a lot of those folks, they start having a really hard time just sitting with themselves, especially if they get an injury and they can't run anymore. And I see it all the time. I see eating disorders in people recovering from drugs or alcohol or both. I see it all the time. For women, you can have 10 or 20 years sobriety, but you're still acting out that eating disorder because it's one of the hardest things to let go of. And the exercise addiction comes right along with that.
We know it's very easy to physiologically help an insulin resistance. How do you reset your dopamine response?
Mindfulness.
Really? Just sitting down?
Honestly, just learning how to meditate, how to, sit down and shut up for 10 minutes. and just let the thoughts come and go. Just learning how to practice with that every day, learning how to stop being judgmental about those thoughts and those things in your head. And, really that's it. Just learning how to be aware of the thoughts that come and drop that judgment, using those different therapeutic approaches that are so popular now, like DBT and CBT, and learning those skills to just recognize when the impulsive behaviors are popping up, when you're feeling that urge. I need this dopamine, like I need my caffeine, right? Like I need my coffee. I mean, it's crazy. I can get high off like 2 cups of coffee and I'm like, I love this buzz, right? But that's like a place where I'm like, yeah, I'm really not going to beat myself up about that. That's fine. It's not negatively affecting my life. If it's affecting my sleep, if it's affecting this or that, then it's something I need to consider, right? So this holistic viewpoint of what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. Like I said, we're human. I'm not expecting anybody to just go figure out how to be a saint and do it all in the name of perfectionism. Like, no way, don't do that. But find out where things are affecting your life. And I don't believe you can do that without mindfulness. You can have the perfect diet. You can move in the perfect way. You can sleep great. You can be thinking you're on top of your stress, like all of those things. But if you aren't really dialed into what's going on in your head and your heart, you're missing a crucial, crucial piece to it.
Even having the perfect diet can be an addiction.
I mean, orthorexia, right?
Yeah,
We hear that word a lot.
Yeah, especially now, like there's so much awareness. I don't know if you were at PFX. You were not at PFX 2015, 14, when Amy
I don't think
Kubal,
so.
Amy Kubal came out saying that she had relapse on orthorexia, and it's just insane to think that you're trying to do something good for yourself and you're actually digging a deeper and deeper hole. And like you said, with marathoners, you go into this thinking you're going to do something healthy. You're destroying your joints, you're destroying your gut, you're having and it's again searching for that dopamine hit.
And so, I want to add on to what you said about Amy, because Amy's come into my life recently in a way that I don't think I ever expected her to. And I just have so much gratitude for her. So 7 weeks ago, one of my loved ones I found out was anorexic. So I have been dealing with an eating disorder of another person's for this last 7 weeks. And it's been hell. It's been the bottom of hell. And I had a really great phone call with Amy recently because I had to face my own eating disorder when I was a child through this. I had totally ignored it. I had always thought I was over it. And I kept seeing Amy actually post some things on Facebook about, that seemed sort of like anti-paleo. And I was like really confused because I'm trying to make sense of all this eating disorder stuff. So I finally just reached out to her and I was like, can we just talk? Like, I just need to know where you're coming from. And I'll tell you, that woman is just, God, she's so brave and she's so insightful. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't about the anti-paleo thing. It was like, we both kind of came to this place, like as nutritionists, as different forms of nutritionists, like we just don't want to give people eating disorders. So yeah, so I'm having to, and like I said, I don't know by the time this airs if it'll be posted or not, but I am writing a very long, lengthy, not 6,000 words, but a lengthy article, called "Is it a diet or an eating disorder?" And like I say in the article, it's not the first like paleo eating disorder article. It's not the 1,000th, but it's mine. It's not paleo bashing by any means. It's just a story of me having to come to terms the last 7 weeks by the fact that I had an eating disorder at 11 that eventually turned into drug addiction, that led to this and that and the next addiction and the next addiction because, my parents, again, in the 80s, they didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to handle it. And now that it's in my life again through a person that I love so much, it's like I had to deal with it so I could help this person deal with their own, because that's how, we'll relive stuff over and over again in our lives until we heal it. That's just how the universe works. When we talk about orthorexia and all these things, I know there's some people who are like, yeah, you got to pick a side and you got to do this and that. And it's like, well, I have to say, I saw some folks who I assume are dealing with some anorexia or eating disorder behaviors at AHS, and it really crushed my heart. Like it really, It really hurt me just to see that people are struggling so much and they're so deep in this addiction. And I think they're few and far between, but I think the folks who are orthorexic is a little bit out of control in this community. And I think we all need to chill the hell out a little bit, honestly. Like, it's one thing if you're really sick, if you're celiac or you're this or you're that, and it's going to make you really sick, and you're in this, for the autoimmune reasons, and you're trying to get well, that I can completely get behind. I understand the healing in this, but I also understand that we can't live a life of black and whiteness. We've got to find some gray if we want to have some peace and some balance.
It's so funny because like at AHS 2017, so one of our dear friends, a mutual friend, Dan Party, that dude is a maniac. I love that dude.
Oh my God, so much.
and we did after each, we had dinner every night. Again, as an extrovert, that made me very happy. And like the first night, we went to a gluten-free pub. Now I'm really like sensitive to wheat, and so I was so excited to go to
Oh
this
yeah, me too. Same, yeah.
And I had gluten-free fish and chips and gluten-free beer, and it was so delicious. And then afterwards, we decided to go to a ice cream shop, and this ice cream shop was a gluten-free, dairy-free ice cream shop, And then the next night, we went to right across the street. There's a gluten-free pizza place, and guess what we did afterwards?
Went and had the ice cream again.
We did have the ice cream again.
Yeah. And you guys were like stressing about like, oh my God, is this crust paleo? Is this ice cream paleo? Right? What's the sugar? Like, you weren't doing that. You were like, okay, we're respecting that we don't want to get sick, right? I decided to indulge in gluten donuts at the apple orchard, and that was the first time I think I've even done gluten in like 2 years. It was one of the things where I was like, I want a gluten donut. I'm going to have it. And 4 hours later, I was in bed with a migraine. And the next morning I had to call the doctor and take 3 migraine pills before I could even get out of bed. Right. That's not good. I don't want to do that again. I learned my lesson for a little while. So it's not about, I'm not saying that everybody should just go out and eat the donut. I don't even like that message because that's gone around in the anti-paleo kind of bashing stuff. My message is that you guys were having community and tribe together. And you were having you found a safe place for you to eat so everybody wouldn't get sick. But then you're not obsessing about, well, maybe this is rice crust or, this is sugary ice cream, right?
Yeah, totally. And so at this gluten-free pub, it's called Capital Cider. If you were ever in Seattle.
Yeah, we went there. Yeah, I had the fish and chips.
Yeah, it was so good. I had a fish and chips and a side of fried chicken. So I just went all out.
Love it.
So we're there, and the waiter comes in and says, "Oh, I have, this." I asked for the list of gluten-free beers, and he says, "Oh, we have this beer. It's called Vanishing Point." And I stopped listening because Vanishing Point is a movie from the 70s, and I was like, "I'm having that." And then, yeah, that's it. You don't need to say anything else, So then he brings me the my beer, and I'm drinking it, and I'm having just such the greatest conversation with Dan and Tiffany, who presented at AHS, and Billy, and then CMJ joined us, and we're just having the greatest conversation, So then I came back home, and I'm talking to my girlfriend, and it's like, oh man, we had such a good time, and then I had a beer. It was called Vanishing Point. And I was like, wait a minute, can you check if that was gluten-free? Because at that point, if he had brought me a glutinous beer, I wouldn't have known, and I would have drank it and whatever. And it turns out it doesn't have gluten, but I bet you, because it was the right situation, with the right people and that even if it had been fully glutinous, I wouldn't have had a reaction.
Right. Yeah. See, I do. I think there's this whole side of this that we don't really talk about because we have to be so scientific and, agnostic within this community, right? It's just, we're just humans and then we just die, right? So there's this piece where I'm actually starting to see it come in though, this kind of this side of going deeper. Some folks in the community are starting to talk about kind of ayahuasca and people are coming over here and they're talking about this piece of it, bringing some spirituality into it. And so you brought up such a solid point when we're in the right context, we can actually have these experiences that would otherwise cause these issues. But it's almost like it's just this whole other layer to this human side of us that we don't really talk about. And I think it's the same thing. Like, maybe it's just because you're in such a parasympathetic state, when you're out with your friends and you're having all these vibes, and it's all so good that your gut wouldn't respond in this kind of negative way. And then when you're home, you're stressed and it's life and all these responsibilities. And so you're a bit more sympathetic than usual, that kind of thing or whatever. Or it really is just kind of this energetic piece. I don't know.
On the flip, you could probably be eating the healthiest fucking food you can find, and you are so into your head that you end up becoming allergic or sensitive, and then you end up with a dish that looks like boiled chicken and broccoli, and that's
Right.
it. There's a Chinese proverb: it's better to eat the wrong food with the right attitude than the right food with the wrong attitude. And in sometimes in this space, we are giving ourselves the wrong attitude, towards something that should be nourishing.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing that I've discovered the most in this new journey of an eating disorder with a loved one. When there was 6 weeks spent in a residential care facility, and so I was spending every weekend there and doing some family support things and sitting in dietetics classes. And so the main support are registered dietitians. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner who practices in a red state, which means I actually can't practice nutrition in my state. The A&D will come after me. And so there's been some bad blood, right, between the registered dietitians, not the ones obviously in the ancestral health community, but other ones outside of that. Not for me personally, but just in general, there's been like this sort of state of mind about it. And I have to tell you that I have never been more grateful for registered dietitians in my life. Now, was the paleo term like a bad word around there? Absolutely. I mean, these places, they don't subscribe to any specific diets. They don't even support vegetarianism or veganism. If you are that, they're not going to be able to support you in that. You're going to have to eat meat and eat a variety of foods because, again, it's like, is it a diet or an eating disorder? And so I had a lot of conversations about, where is this balance here? I eat this way, like it's worked for me. We haven't even discussed like it changed my mental health. I mean, there's all these healing things about it, right? But then when I'm there and I'm eating there with my family member, I can't actually like eat paleo, right? Because we're all the people that were all in that situation are all gluten free, and they are. If you have a medical reason, they will absolutely. They'll do that, and we did. So it all worked out. We were able to all be gluten free, but so I had to eat stuff that was kind of like making me sick, because there's an expectation as a family member that you complete your meals, that it's just kind of hard to deal with all the dietary issues in that situation. And so I'd sit down and go, oh, like, okay, there's soy cheese on a gluten-free pizza. I'm very allergic to soy, and I know I'm going to get really sick, but it's a situation where my visit wasn't planned. It was last minute. They're just accommodating the best they can. And I'm sitting in a room full of people with anorexia and bulimia. I'm not going to not eat it, right? Because that's what is expected of me in this situation. And so, yeah, so was I really sick the next morning? Yeah, sure I was, but that's not what was important. And it's not like I'm gonna like get cancer because I ate that soy cheese one time. You know what I mean? Like, these extreme places that we are going in this community are just too much. Like, we could all get sick. We could all get sick and die. I had the worst year of my life. I got breast implant illness. I had breast implants for 2 years. I had an extreme amount of stress in my life. Like I said earlier, some family stuff. And it triggered, an autoimmune response with my breast implants. And it gave me an autoimmune disease. I didn't have one before. And now I'm dealing with that. I mean, luckily I got my implants out at the beginning of the summer and I got a whole lot better, like real quick. But I still have all of these factors, but I'm not going to like sit in a room where an expectation is I eat the food put in front of me to support all the other people in that room who are actually really sick and really need that support, I'm not going to sit there and be orthorexic in that room, because that's the other thing. There's people with orthorexia in that clinic. That's the other thing. So I got to tell you, why I'm writing this article, I have a very, very different viewpoint of what food looks like in this community after what I've just gone through.
We are really not talking out of our ass here, like I'm sure there's gonna be people that are gonna be like, well, Guillermo and Kendall, now they're against the paleo community, fuck them too.
Yeah.
No,
Go
like,
right ahead. You don't have to like me. It's okay.
when you go through chemotherapy, they actually tell you, do not eat your favorite foods, because you're going to have this nausea and you're going to hate your favorite foods. A majority of people have experienced that. Like you get the flu, or you get like a virus, and you happen to eat your favorite thing, at that point, and then you throw up, and now you associate the nausea with that. It's an evolutionary mechanism to prevent sickness. And now in the back of your head, you make the connection, oh, nausea and ice cream, and now you are completely averted to ice cream. That can happen too. So, we have evolutionary mechanisms, and maybe there's a little bit of this and that. Maybe you had an autoimmune disease, or maybe you had, gut issues, GERD, anything like that. And then you stop eating wheat and that goes away. But maybe it was the combination of maybe not eating processed foods, and maybe starting a meditation practice, and maybe moving better. And all of those things, converge and help you get over that. But you associate the biggest thing, oh, it's wheat. And now you have this super strong connection in your brain. And now every time you even smell it, now you start getting sick.
Absolutely. Our brains are so powerful. It's crazy what they're capable of. It really honestly is. And so I think there's so much that we don't even know, but I also always want to say that is what everything you said is so right. But then when people go to that extreme and it's like, I'm going to cure cancer by talking to my tumor, I lost a girlfriend to that. I lost a girlfriend who died with, left two toddlers and infants behind, because she was doing raw food and doing all of these just natural things, and she died a year later of breast cancer at 27 years old. So I really truly have found this place of beautiful balance of mixing Eastern and Western and holistic and medical, and it's the same with the food. It's the same with everything. I'm a big believer, if you need pharmaceutical medication to keep you from killing yourself, I think that you should take it. I do. And I've been doing that for years, because my children didn't deserve to have a mother who was suicidal. Does my medication...
Your girls deserve a mom, you're...
Right, exactly. A mom who can get out of bed and be their mom. And, this stuff was passed on to me. I don't have a choice that I have it. But what I do have a choice is how I live my life around it. And, I'm my psychiatrist's star patient. I come in once a year to get my refills. And he's so wow, if everybody would just do what you did to make their medication work effectively. This is why you get to be on a low dose, because you do all these things to support your medication working. And then your medication supports your life to be able to do these things. It's this beautiful full circle. It's balance, always.
At AHS, Tiffany Turner had a presentation on schizophrenia and the evolution of schizophrenia. And one of the things is that, okay, so there's many theories. For example, group splitting, and maybe the schizophrenic person had a bigger personality and had crazy ideas that were charismatic, and it broke groups apart and made manageable smaller tribes. Now, living near the ocean, eating those omega-3 fatty acids from fish and from different crustaceans, maybe that kept that disease process at bay. And she found a couple of papers where people were able to reverse those symptoms with using EPA, which is a fraction of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, I'm not saying that EPA is the cure for schizophrenia, but it's a polygenic disease process that could have different manifestations. So if you eat a healthy diet, maybe you might be able to shave off some of the symptoms and make it manageable. Again, if you need medications, why not stack all of the deck, in your favor? Eat as healthy, have a meditation practice, exercise properly, and then maybe you might need that low dose instead of having the swings. Again, all of that in balance so you don't become orthorexic.
Absolutely. And I think, I think this all just kind of goes back together to everything that we've been talking about, is like that dopamine seeking, or these kind of all or nothings, like extremes. I mean, that was just always how I was until, I got medicated. I did loads and loads of therapy. I did trauma healing, addiction recovery, mindfulness practice, all of those things, is when I finally found that sweet spot of like, oh, this is what middle ground looks like. I like it here. This is a really nice place to chill out. This is good. I get it now. And I think I like that you brought that up about the EPA and the people living near the ocean and the schizophrenia, because it's been discussed time and time again. And I know there's not a lot of great studies out there, but the ketogenic diet, now please don't anybody go, oh, Kendall's promoting keto. I'm like, I don't do diets. What I'm saying is that there has been some studies, not enough, but some studies that are showing that a ketogenic diet is working beneficially in those schizophrenic, bipolar situations. So one of the smartest people I know on this topic is Dr. Emily Deans, evolutionary psychiatry. I've had her on my show before. And so what she's talked about is, the fact, so with the ketogenic diet, it's used in folks with seizures. And so the ketogenic diet is kind of an anti-seizure diet. And then when you look at bipolar drugs, they're almost always anti-seizure drugs. And so that's where you see that connection. I'm a person who can get into ketosis like super, super fast, but it's not something that I like to maintain. I might do it as kind of a reset or whatever. I always feel pretty good mentally. I feel like my brain is kind of functioning a little bit better. But then I generally, again, anything that's restricting for me can kind of be triggering. So I just always have to be careful, because when I'm up on the wagon and I fall off the wagon, it's a very hard fall for me. So if let's say I've been in ketosis for, a couple of months or whatever, I tend to realize I'm not eating enough meals. And then, I'm getting a little crazy. And this is where the people are like, well, you're not doing this enough. And, I don't want to ever hear a person ever say you need to paleo harder, you need to keto harder. You're not, because I was vegan and I heard that shit. And it's just like, no, that's not what this is about. We don't need to do anything harder. We need to do what works for our bodies. And so, then it's somebody's birthday and I have a piece of gluten-free cake. I'm a binge eater. And so the next morning, I'm sneaking like my kid's cake out of the refrigerator, and by noon it's gone and I'm sick as a dog, right? So all of that, I did not mean to go on that tangent there, but so I just did that. But the whole point was to say that there are these benefits to eating certain ways, but then also when you are dealing with people who are dealing with those mental health struggles, it can be very, very hard to stay on that permanently, and so we really just need to have kind of some flexibility within that stuff. And like you said, using this whole entire model of stacking those odds in our favor, that's really what we should be looking at, instead of saying, if you do this, you don't have to do this. Well, let me tell you, for years, I tried to do all the holistic things. I tried to do all these extreme things to avoid medication. It was bad. And it was not worth it. And I'm so grateful that I finally hit enough of a bottom with the suicidal ideation, the depression, all of the feelings that I was having, to say, I need help. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're in that place where you are just fighting medication, but your life is miserable, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I want to give you the grace to say, just take care of yourself in the best way that you need to, and stop beating yourself up and stop judging yourself.
Yeah, put that mask on.
Yeah, put that mask on. Put it on.
And you see that with things like thyroid medication. People are like, I don't want to take a pill forever. But if having that pill that is basically just thyroid hormone means the difference between being able to travel, because if you want to be completely off of thyroid medication, you gotta live a pretty healthy life, sleeping, good sleeping and eating a perfect diet 100% of the time. And if that pill is going to give you some latitude to enjoy life, because if you're not enjoying life, what's the fucking point?
Right. Exactly. I think Melissa Jolwan and I from Well Fed, she and I had this exact conversation because with her, it was about the thyroid medication. And for me, it was the mental health medication. And it was just hitting that bottom to be like, I don't care what anybody else in this community thinks. I don't care if you support my work, if you, whatever. I'm going to take care of myself. And it's really hard to be a quote expert in this community and to come out as saying, yeah, I need medication. Yeah, because it seems like a lot of people come into this wanting that perfectionism. I feel like the paleo community is full of perfectionist behavior, and that's, it really fed into that for me for a long time until I hit another bottom and said, I don't want to be a perfectionist anymore. If I want to eat that damn gluten-free cookie, I'm going to eat that cookie. I'm going to figure out what that means and stop trying to prove to anybody who I want you to think I am.
And if you're in Seattle, go to Capital Cider and then go have some ice cream.
Oh my God. So, God, that restaurant was absolutely. Yeah, I was really fortunate to be staying with a group of gals who one was had lived in Seattle for 8 years. So man, she had the insides. She knew exactly where to go. It was great.
So Kendall, before we sign off, I want you to talk to people about how to reach out. If you have a friend that you might see that they're slipping into orthorexia, or maybe you don't want to be the asshole to that. How do you do it properly? How do you reach out and extend a hand? Do you wait for that person to reach out to you, or because that can be a very sensitive topic?
Yeah, oh God, it's so hard. My entire life is about addiction recovery in one way or the other. And, in the 12 steps, even one of the steps that we use and talk about is, when someone reaches out, I want the hand of that program to be there, so it's about carrying that message, but it's also about carrying it in a sensitive way that doesn't offend people or push them away. And so I think that message from the 12-step programs, it actually really works well in, something like orthorexia or eating disorders. I really just try to put the message kind of out there in a broad way. Obviously I'm a really outspoken person, so I'll pretty much talk about anything on Facebook, a lot of personal stuff, just because I always believe if it's going to help somebody else, it's worth it. And so what I've seen happen over the years is that whether it's kind of nutritionally, I haven't had people really come to me yet because I'm just now starting to speak out about eating disorders and orthorexia. So I imagine that's something that people are going to start coming to me about. But in the past, what it's been about, it's really usually women who are drinking too much and they want to stop drinking and they need help with that. So I've learned it's not really valuable for me to go to people and offer help. It's valuable for me to be an example. So that they know they can come to. So I always try to put everything out there in the most non-judgmental way as possible. Even if it's just sharing my story over lunch with somebody, oh, this is what happened to me. People are more relatable, they can relate to you in that way. And so I think it goes the same way. If you see somebody with the food stuff kind of going to this place that might not be healthy for them, I don't think a person stepping in is always helpful. I think it can push somebody away from you and you can lose that relationship. So again, back to boundaries. I'm a big believer in codependent recovery, and I believe that, having boundaries is the best thing that we can do. So not letting their behavior affect you in a negative way. If you need to have some distance away from them, especially if they're doing something that can kind of be triggering to you. So I set boundaries all the time with people, with friends, and just choose who's safe for me to be around and who isn't. And so I think also, again, just be that if you're not a person who's going to come out on social media and say, oh yeah, I have all these issues or I know all this information, that's okay. Everybody doesn't need to be that voice. I've always said I'm happy to be the voice for people who haven't yet found their voices. But you could just be I don't know. I feel like you can say it in conversation in a way that a person doesn't feel like you're attacking them or judging them, because maybe they don't even know yet, right? And that is their process and their journey. And one of the things I've been saying a lot lately, there's just a lot of really sick people in my life that I'm really hurting for. But what I know is that it's not my job to take their pain away. Our pain it's our power. It's our greatest lessons in life is when we're in our pain. We do not find miracles in the light. We find them in the darkness. And it's important to not ever feel like it's your job to fix somebody else's pain or take it away from them. You can say, I am sorry you're going through this, or it seems like you're hurting. I'm here if you need an ear. Can I bring you dinner? Like, we can say those things, but it's never our job to talk somebody out of what they're going through. And I'll close it with this example that at not this year's Paleo Effects, but the Paleo Effects before I got sober again was, I guess, that 2013 one. I think the years all run together. Maybe it was 14. Maybe it was I don't even remember. It really doesn't even matter. But anyway, I've been sober for just over 3 years again. So it was that Paleo Effects, and it's when I met my business partner, Susan McCauley, who from Evolved Recovery. So Susan had many, many years of sobriety. I mean, Susan was just such an example of that. And she was sitting on an addiction panel that was actually primarily about food addiction, but she was the only recovering substance and alcohol person on the panel. And I wasn't even planning to go to that panel. And someone that I was hanging out with wanted to go. So I went in, and man, I was just like in tears. Like, it hit me, and I still didn't even know it hit me. I didn't even realize that it really hit me because I was drinking to medicate my feelings away. But later we had a mutual friend, and I talked to her. We introduced to each other, and I said, yeah, I used to be in recovery, but like, I could drink now, like, it's fine. She didn't bat an eye. She's like, oh, cool. Okay. Not an eye. 2 months later, I texted her. I was sitting on a beach in Charleston, South Carolina. I had blacked out for the first time ever. Like, I was out, having a night out, I was at a business meeting, actually, just kept drinking and, hit a bottom. And that next day I was like, this isn't working. This is not who I'm going to be. I refuse. I've worked too hard in my life to not be this person. And I texted her from that beach, and I said, I've got to get sober. And she just was like, I'm here for you. I'll be whatever you need me to be through this. And that, she saw me drinking at that Paleo FX, like dinners and stuff. She saw how I was drinking. She saw how hurt I was. She could have easily said, are you sure? Like, you can drink? She could have done any of that. And she didn't, but she was an example to me. And I knew to go to her when I was ready for help.
And sometimes people dig their heels deeper.
If
you try to say, are you sure? And yeah, I'm sure. I'm going to show you. And it can get really, it can turn into a vicious cycle, and now you just lost the person you could have saved. It's like, talking to people about this ancestral diet or paleo or whatever you want to call it. The hardest people to reach are my family.
Oh, I stopped that a long time ago. I learned that lesson. I pushed so many people in my family away. I hurt them. I hurt them. And it's really funny because, like, it's not funny because my dad is really sick, and he's having bypass surgery in a couple of weeks. And it's really scary, actually, because we are so close now. But there was a time where he wouldn't talk to me. He'd had he'd gone into a diabetic coma. And his sugar was like 600. He was a truck driver. He was on the road. He was in some state. I don't even know where. And I kept lecturing him to, like, go to the hospital where he was. I didn't even know that he'd been in the hospital. And he took a break from me, right? Fast forward years later, when he was ready, he came to me and was like, I'm ready. Help me. Right. And that was beautiful. And I got to tell you, I don't think he ever would have done that if I hadn't taken his cue of, it's too much, back off. Right? That's so exactly.
The reason I have a podcast, the reason I have a blog, it's because I want to help people when they're ready to get helped. And we, even within the paleo community, we have very argumentative people that can make, that make you all sometimes even, feel uncomfortable when you're discussing a topic, and they start like, actually, and then they start, just laying it thick.
Yes, I do know. I witnessed it just last week in Seattle.
Exactly. And when you try to convince someone that paleo is the way, and you start doing all of this thing trying to be a prophet for paleo, you you're never gonna convince someone. You will never convince a vegan with a lecture. B, that person's probably going to dig their heels deeper and even cross their arms and say no, and then C, you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, my husband used to always say to me, don't bash on the vegans. They're your future clients. So he would always remind me of that. And I'm like, I learned that. It's like, and now, and not that I think they're, whether you, I mean, I'm at the point now, I know friends who've been vegan for decades. And I'm like, if that's working for you, like, I'm not going to judge anymore. Like, I am so done with judgment. It's just, I lived so much of my life in it because I didn't want to deal with myself. So I judged everyone and everything around me. And, now I'm just like, God, I don't know, maybe it's being 40 and having these teenage daughters and just living a very different life than I've ever lived before. That mindfulness stuff, all of that. I just want people to do what works for them. And if you need some help dialing some stuff in or finding a deeper connection to ancestral life, which is primarily what I do, it's what I love. I'm here. Like, I'm here, but man, just find happiness, find some peace, whatever works for you. Go live your life. And I'm not going to sit in judgment of you.
And this is not an exclusive thing, as soon as someone reach out, be ready to help them. And again, without any judgment. Okay, cool. Don't start with, well, actually in 2012 you told me I was crazy for eating like a caveman. No. Just be ready.
Oh my God, that's so nasty. I
Yeah,
know.
just be ready, just be ready, non-judgmentally, and help, just like when you texted your friend.
Yeah, I agree. You've got to be there. I mean, and also if they don't do what you suggest to them, like, let that go too. Don't have an expectation, because it's probably once a month or more that a woman reaches out to me on social media and messages and says, I'm drinking too much. I need to, like, what can I do? What should I do? And I give them all sorts of information and whatever. And 9 times out of 10, they don't stop drinking then. Right. But I've armed them with some information that in the future, if it is the right time, they now have that information that maybe they didn't have before. And they also know, hopefully, that they can come back to me and I'm not going to judge them and go, well, you didn't stop drinking the last time. Right. But again, I have those boundaries with people. Like, I'm not going to chase people. I'm not going to think any more or less of you if you get sober or you don't. But I'm also not going to, like, answer drunk text at 2 a.m. Right? Does that make sense? Right.
Totally,
So
totally. You got to protect yourself.
Right. So, and I'm not gonna, and the same thing with, like, family when they're sick. I'm not gonna, like, let somebody call me and complain every day about their illness if they refuse to listen to what I've offered. I'm just like, we're not gonna have that conversation. We'll talk about something else.
We could go for hours.
I know. Oh my God.
But
two extroverts talking together, it's dangerous.
It's just dangerous, So, Kendall, where is your next appearance now that you've come out of your cocoon into a butterfly?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I'm still dealing, with, like I said, a lot of family stuff right now, and I'm putting all that first. So I had planned to go do this big book tour and plan all these big things, and that's just not happening right now. So I do actually have a book signing and a free talk in Charlotte, September 26th. So anybody who's kind of in that North Carolina surrounding area or knows somebody, I will be giving an introduction to ancestral health talk. Because again, that 5-year-old little girl in those National Geographic magazines, I still love to connect people to that feeling that gave me. So I'm doing that. I've got some projects that I can't really talk about right now yet,
cool,
that are in the works. And I think those are going to be some exciting things to help other people with. I am working closely with my school, the Nutritional Therapy Association. We're developing some different things right now that I'm just so pumped about. and very honored to get to be part of. So I don't have a whole lot of stuff booked outside of that right now. I'll be back on the conference circuit starting probably in about March. I'll be presenting at the Nutritional Therapy Association conference out in Vancouver, Washington, the beginning of March. I believe I'll be talking a lot about my breast implant illness out there. And so I'm really passionate about getting the word about that out, because there's a lot of stigma and there's a lot of shame about it for us women who make that choice to get implants, and then we get really sick. So we beat ourselves up about it. And there is an entire population of women right now with breast implants, and they have autoimmune disease and they don't know why. They don't know the connection. So, so there's all of that, and who knows what will come up. Hopefully lots of exciting things. And hopefully eventually I will get to go on that book tour, because getting the word out about the Born Primal book is, it features 37 experts in the ancestral health community. It was a project that came from my own podcast called Born Primal. And I took some of my favorite interviews and I turned them into a book. And these transcripts, I tell you what, these nuggets of information, you'll never find that much stuff in one book ever again. It's unbelievable. It's got like Rob Wolf and Diane Sanfilippo and Sarah Valentine and Dr. Colin Champ. Yeah. Oh, of course, Dan Party. That's my homeboy. Yeah, Daryl Edwards. I mean, we cover, it's about so much more than nutrition. Melissa Jolwin's in it, Sarah Fragoso. So of course we talk about some nutritional aspects in it, but a lot of the folks that are featured in the book are talking about, lifestyle stuff. Like I think Dan's conversation was mostly about like sleep and, movement and stuff. And then I got to have 3 different reality TV stars in my book, which was exciting. But, we're not talking about like, Big Brother or Survivor. We're talking about people who are on shows like National Geographic's The Great Human Race, Bill Schindler, Kat Bigney, and then Nicole Appelian almost won the 2nd season of The Alone Show on History. So it's people with this deep connection to the ancestral world. Like they're not even in the paleo world, but they're literally living this stuff we're talking about every day, literally out there living it. So I wanted to bring them into our community because I don't think we have enough of them in our community. There's all these people out there already dealing with stuff, like Nicole Appelian. She was diagnosed with MS at 30. She was bedridden for nearly 4 years. She has, a PhD. She has lived in Botswana and tracked lions. She's done these incredible things. And she finally realized that, she didn't need to give herself a shot every single day, that nature was very healing for her. And so she did this, like we said earlier, she stacked all these different things in her favor that she could deal with her MS in a much more positive way that would give her a better quality of life. And that's exactly what she did. And then she went out there on The Alone Show for like almost 2 months, I believe. Right. So that's the kind of people that I feature in this book, because there's so many messages out there. It's hard. Like, you can listen to your podcast and my podcast and Rob Wolf's podcast and Balance Bites, and we can go try every day to get a podcast, right? And that's amazing that we have access to all that stuff. But I wanted to give people a place to have it all just like right there in like one book. Just open it up. Oh, today I want to go read about sleep, or today I want to go, read about meditation or therapy, or Emily Deans is in it, so she's talking about psychiatry.
It gets tiring to talk about the evils of gluten every day.
Oh my God. So over it. So darn over it.
Yeah. Okay, and if someone wants to become your client and wants some nutritional advice, or wants to reach out to you because maybe they have a substance problem, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the best option would be just to go to my website, bornprimal.com. There's a contact form on there. And then also, if you are interested in the addiction recovery work, we have a website called evolvedrecovery.com. We have a podcast there as well. We have years and years of content. So there's so much information on there. And again, you can contact us through that website if the addiction recovery stuff is more of what you're looking for. We are always happy to help. We actually have a course called 6 Weeks to Evolved Recovery. That's at sobercourse.com. So yeah, there's a lot of different outlets, and you can find me on, social media under Born Primal. So I would love to talk to anybody about any of the things, especially that we've discussed on the show today. If you have some questions and want some more information about, kind of any of the things that I share about in my story, then I'm happy to have that conversation.
Well, it's such an amazing conversation, Kendall. I'm so happy to have met you, and
You too.
maybe we can converge at PFX, and now we'll have two extroverts in the room when we go have dinner.
It might be dangerous, Guillermo. It might be really, really dangerous. I don't know.
The world might
We
explode
could
or
scare
something.
people. I know. The whole room might just be like, it's too much.
Maybe we can support more introverts then. We can
Yeah,
have like 12 introverts instead of like
right.
8. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to connect. I'm so glad that we finally met each other, and I just really appreciate this opportunity to come and chat with you and your
Well,
audience.
thank you so much, Kendall, and I'll see you soon.